My daughter was living a luxury life with my secret $5 million, after abandoning me. I let her enjoy it for a month. Then, I made one call, and all her assets were frozen. If this story already pulls at your heart, please subscribe and tell me where you're watching from, because what happened next will shake you to your very core. This isn't just about money. This is about a father's love being trampled underfoot by the very person he gave everything for. This is about the moment when silence becomes complicity, and when a broken heart finally finds the strength to demand justice. Let me take you back to where it all began. 28 years ago, I held my newborn daughter in my arms for the first time. Her mother, my beautiful wife Sarah, looked at me with tired but radiant eyes and whispered, "She's going to change our world." Little did we know how prophetic those words would become. When Emma was just 3 years old, Sarah lost her battle with cancer. I remember standing in that hospital room, holding my little girl's hand as she asked me why Mommy wouldn't wake up. In that moment, I made a promise, not just to Sarah's memory, but to the innocent child who had already lost so much. I swore I would be everything she needed: mother, father, protector, provider. Those early years were a blur of sacrifice and sleepless nights. I worked 2 jobs, installing air conditioning systems during the day and cleaning office buildings at night. My hands were always dirty, my back always aching, but when I came home and saw Emma's face light up, it all felt worth it. I gave up my dreams of opening my own business. I sold my motorcycle, my golf clubs, anything that wasn't essential. Every penny went toward building her world. I remember the bedtime stories I would make up, weaving tales of brave princesses who could conquer anything. Emma would curl up against my chest, her small fingers tracing the work calluses on my hands as I spoke. "Tell me the one about the princess and the magic castle, Daddy," she would whisper. And I would spin another story, another dream, painting a future where she could have everything I never could. Her birthday parties were elaborate productions on a shoestring budget. I learned to bake cakes from YouTube videos, staying up until 2 a.m. to perfect the decorations because I couldn't afford the fancy bakery ones her friends had. I transformed our modest living room into princess palaces with bed sheets and Christmas lights. The joy in her eyes made every exhausted muscle worth it. When she graduated high school as valedictorian, I sat in that auditorium in my one good suit, the same one I'd worn to Sarah's funeral, and tears streamed down my face. As she gave her speech about reaching for dreams and never giving up, she looked directly at me and said, "Thank you to my dad, who taught me that love is the only wealth that matters." The entire audience turned to look at me, this weathered man in the 3rd row, and for a moment, I felt like the richest person alive. I thought she'd never forget the man who built her world, brick by brick, dream by dream. I thought the foundation of love I'd laid would be unshakable. I was wrong. The first crack appeared during her sophomore year at university. I had saved for years to send her to that prestigious school, working overtime shifts that left me bone-tired but proud. When I visited for Parents' Weekend, something had changed. Emma introduced me to her friends with a forced smile, her voice slightly embarrassed as she said, "This is my dad." No pride, no warmth, just obligation. I watched her friends size me up with barely concealed disdain. Their fathers wore expensive suits and drove luxury cars to campus. I arrived in my 15-year-old Honda Civic, wearing my cleanest jeans and a button-down shirt I'd ironed 3 times. I saw the way they looked at my weathered hands, the way their conversations died when I approached. Emma saw it too, and instead of defending me, she seemed to shrink with embarrassment. The distance grew wider with each semester. Phone calls became shorter, visits became rarer. When she did come home, she seemed uncomfortable in our modest house. She'd comment on how small her room was, how outdated the furniture looked. "Dad, you really should upgrade this place," she'd say, not knowing that every spare dollar still went toward her education, her future. The breaking point came when she brought her fiancé, Marcus, home for dinner. I had spent the entire day preparing, buying the best cuts of meat I could afford, cleaning the house until it gleamed. When they arrived, Emma walked through the door with this tall, impeccably dressed young man who looked around our home like he was surveying a museum of poverty. Throughout dinner, Emma barely spoke to me. When Marcus asked about my work, she quickly changed the subject. When I tried to share stories about Emma's childhood, she cut me off with visible irritation. "Dad, Marcus doesn't need to hear about all that old stuff," she said, her voice sharp with embarrassment. But the moment that shattered my heart completely came when Marcus excused himself to take a phone call. I saw it as an opportunity to connect, to ask Emma about her happiness, her plans. Instead, she leaned across the table and whispered harshly, "Please don't tell him about the jobs, about the night shifts. He doesn't need to know how poor we were." Poor. She called our life poor. The life I had built for her with my own bleeding hands was something to be ashamed of. I felt something die inside my chest at that moment. I forced a smile and nodded, but that word echoed in my mind for weeks afterward. Poor. As if love could be measured in dollars. As if sacrifice could be priced. After they left that night, I sat alone at the kitchen table where we used to do homework together, where I used to help her with math problems and science projects. I looked around at our home, not grand, but filled with 25 years of memories, and I wondered when it had become something she was ashamed of. When had I become someone she was ashamed of? I told myself it was just youth, just the influence of her new environment. I told myself that deep down, she still loved the man who had given her everything. I was wrong. What Emma didn't know, what no one knew, was that her poor, embarrassing father had been building something extraordinary. While she saw only the calloused hands and the modest home, I had been quietly, methodically, creating her future. It started small. 25 years ago, when I first became a single father, an old friend who worked in real estate gave me some advice: "John, don't just survive. Invest. Even if it's just $20 a month." Those words changed everything. I began buying small properties in neighborhoods that others overlooked. Run-down houses that I could afford with my meager savings, places that needed work but had potential. I spent weekends renovating them myself, learning plumbing and electrical work from library books and friendly contractors. Every property I flipped, I put the profits into the next investment. As the years passed, those forgotten neighborhoods began to gentrify. Property values soared. What I had bought for $15,000 was suddenly worth $60,000. The rental income from my small portfolio allowed me to invest in stocks, bonds, mutual funds. I lived simply, drove old cars, wore worn clothes, but my investment account grew steadily, quietly, like a secret garden. By the time Emma graduated college, I had accumulated something I never thought possible: $5 million. $5 million built from sacrifice, discipline, and 25 years of putting her future before my comfort. I had created a trust fund that would secure not just her life, but her children's lives, and their children after that. The plan was perfect in its simplicity. I would surprise her on her wedding day, the ultimate gift from a father to his daughter. I imagined the look on her face when I handed her the legal documents, when she realized that her poor father had given her true wealth. I pictured her tears of joy, her apologies for the distance, her understanding that love comes in many forms. I met with my lawyer, Richard Hayes, to finalize the trust structure. "John," he said, looking over the documents, "this is incredibly generous. But are you sure you want to give her complete control immediately? Maybe consider a phased release, or maintaining some oversight." I shook my head firmly. "She's my daughter, Richard. She deserves to know that I trust her completely. The money is hers, it always has been. I've just been keeping it safe." Richard nodded, but his expression remained concerned. Just remember, John, money can change people. Sometimes it's not the amount that matters, but how it's received. Timing is everything. I left his office that day feeling lighter than I had in years. Soon, Emma would understand. Soon, she would see that her father's love had been working behind the scenes all along, building something beautiful for her future. The trust was meant to secure her future, not destroy our bond. How wrong I was about everything. The discovery happened by accident, the way most life-changing moments do. It was 3 months before her planned wedding, and Emma had stopped by unexpectedly to pick up some of her old things from her childhood room. I was at work, and she used her key to let herself in. Later, I would reconstruct the moment from the evidence left behind. A manila envelope from Richard's law office had slipped behind my desk, probably fallen when I was reviewing the trust documents. Emma must have been moving furniture to reach something and found it wedged between the wall and the desk. When I came home that evening, she was sitting at the kitchen table with the legal papers spread before her. Her face was pale, her hands trembling slightly as she held the trust documentation. $5 million. Her name as the sole beneficiary. 25 years of accumulated wealth, all designated for her future. "Dad," she said, and her voice was different, harder somehow. "We need to talk." I felt my heart leap with panic. This wasn't how it was supposed to happen. This wasn't the joyful revelation I had planned. "Emma, I can explain." "Explain what?" "That you've been lying to me my entire life. That while I've been struggling with student loans and working part-time jobs, you've been sitting on $5 million. Her voice rose with each word, fury building like a storm. "I wasn't lying, sweetheart. I was saving it for you. It's always been for you. I was going to give it to you at the wedding as a surprise." "A surprise?" She laughed, but there was no joy in it. "Do you have any idea what I've been through? The stress, the debt, the worry about my future. And you've just been hoarding money like some kind of miser." I tried to reach for her hand, but she pulled away. "Emma, everything I did was for you. Every investment, every sacrifice. Every lie," she interrupted. "How many times did I ask if you needed help with bills? How many times did I worry about you working those awful jobs? And you just let me suffer with guilt while you played the martyr." The conversation spiraled from there. In Emma's mind, I had become the villain of her story. The money wasn't a gift of love, it was evidence of deception. She couldn't see the 25 years of careful planning, only the fact that she had lived modestly while wealth existed in her name. Over the following weeks, her visits became more frequent, but they weren't about reconciliation. She wanted control of the trust immediately. She brought Marcus with her, and I watched as they discussed our money like I was already dead. The legal maneuvering began, Emma working with her own attorney to gain immediate access to funds that were technically already hers. The law was on her side. I had structured the trust to give her complete control at age 25, and she had passed that milestone 2 years earlier. In my naivety, I had built no safeguards, no conditions, no protections. I had trusted completely. The final transfer happened on a Tuesday morning in Richard's office. Emma sat across from me, no longer the little girl who used to trace my calluses with tiny fingers. She was cold, efficient, businesslike. As she signed the papers that would give her immediate access to everything I had built, she barely looked at me. "This should have been mine years ago," she said as the documents were notarized. "I could have invested it better, grown it more. All those years you wasted." After the papers were signed, she stood to leave. I waited for some acknowledgement, some gratitude, some recognition of the love behind the money. Instead, she paused at the door and said, "I'll be in touch when I figure out what to do with the properties you've been mismanaging." That night, she sent a text message that changed everything. I'm moving to California. Marcus has opportunities there. I won't be coming back to this place. A week later, a courier delivered a single piece of paper to my door. In Emma's handwriting, just 4 words, "Goodbye, Pauper." Emma. I read those words over and over, sitting in the same kitchen where I had once helped her with homework, where I had celebrated her achievements, where I had dreamed of her future. Pauper. She had taken everything I had worked for and called me a pauper. I couldn't cry. The pain was too deep for tears. It felt like my heart had been carved out with a rusty knife, leaving only a hollow space where love used to live. The weeks that followed Emma's departure were the darkest of my life. Darker than when Sarah died, because at least then I had a purpose, raising our daughter. Now, that purpose was gone, and with it, my reason for existing. I stopped answering the phone. The few friends I had from work would call, but their voices seemed to come from another world, a world where fathers were honored for their sacrifices rather than branded as liars. Mrs. Henderson from next door would bring me casseroles and leave them on the porch, but most went untouched. Food had lost all taste. The house felt enormous and suffocating at the same time. Every corner held memories of Emma, the height marks on the doorframe where I measured her growth, the little handprints we had pressed into the concrete patio when she was 7, the bookshelf filled with stories I had read to her thousands of times. Each memory was a fresh wound. I stopped attending St. Mary's, the church where Emma had been baptized, where she had taken her first communion, where I had prayed every Sunday for 25 years that God would help me be the father she deserved. The last time I sat in those pews, Father Martinez asked about Emma, and I couldn't form the words to explain what had happened. I just walked out in the middle of his question. Sleep became impossible. I would lie in my bed, staring at the ceiling, replaying every moment of her childhood, searching for clues about where I had gone wrong. Had I loved her too much? Too little? Had my sacrifices made her weak instead of strong? Had my humility taught her to be ashamed of where she came from? The worst part was the silence. For 25 years, my phone had rung regularly with Emma's voice, excited calls about college acceptances, worried calls about exams, happy calls about new boyfriends. Now, the silence stretched on endlessly. I would check my phone obsessively, hoping for a message, a call, any sign that she remembered I existed. Some days, I would sit for hours in her old room, unchanged since high school. The walls still held her academic achievement certificates, photos from school dances, the corsage from her senior prom that she had insisted on keeping. I would hold her old stuffed animals and remember the nights she would crawl into my bed after nightmares, how safe she felt in my arms, how she would whisper, "I love you, Daddy," before falling asleep. You can survive hunger, you can survive cold, you can survive physical pain, but nothing prepares you for the agony of being discarded by your own blood. It's not just heartbreak, it's soul break. It's the complete unraveling of everything you believed about love, sacrifice, and family. I began to understand why some people just disappear, why they walk away from their lives and start over somewhere else where no one knows their story. The temptation to flee was overwhelming. What was keeping me in this house full of ghosts? What was the point of continuing a life that my own daughter had judged worthless? But something in me refused to give up entirely. Maybe it was Sarah's voice echoing in my memory, maybe it was stubborn pride, or maybe it was the faint hope that someday Emma would realize what she had thrown away. I held on to life by the thinnest of threads, existing rather than living, waiting for something to change. 3 months after Emma disappeared from my life, I made the mistake of looking her up online. I told myself I just wanted to know she was safe, that she was happy, that the money was serving its intended purpose of securing her future. What I found instead was a parade of luxury that felt like salt in open wounds. Her social media accounts, which she had kept private during college, were now public showcases of her new life. Photo after photo of exotic locations: Emma sipping champagne on a yacht in the Mediterranean, Emma shopping on Rodeo Drive with armfuls of designer bags, Emma and Marcus dining at restaurants where a single meal cost more than I used to earn in a week. The captions were what hurt most. "Living my best life," she wrote under a picture of herself in a 5-star hotel suite in Dubai. "Self-made and loving it," accompanied a photo of her standing beside a brand new BMW. Self-made. The irony was like a dagger to my heart. Local news websites picked up her story. "Young entrepreneur takes California by storm," read one headline. The article described her as an up-and-coming investor who had built her portfolio from the ground up. It quoted her as saying, "I learned the value of money early. I know what it means to work for what you have." I read that quote a dozen times, each reading more painful than the last. She was rewriting history, turning my 25 years of sacrifice into her own origin story. The money I had earned through calloused hands and sleepless nights had become her self-made success. The investments I had researched and carefully selected were now her brilliant business acumen. Magazine features began appearing: 30 Under 30, Rising Stars in Real Estate, and Young Money, the New Generation of Investors. In every interview, Emma spoke about her natural instinct for wealth building and her independent approach to financial success. Never once was I mentioned. Never once did she acknowledge that her fortune had been built by a father who loved her. The most devastating article appeared in a lifestyle magazine 6 months after her departure. It featured a glossy photo spread of the penthouse apartment she had purchased in San Francisco, complete with panoramic views and furnishings that cost more than most people's annual salaries. The article was titled, "Making It on My Own: How I Built My Fortune Before 30." In the interview, Emma spoke about her philosophy of financial independence. "I've always believed that waiting for handouts or inheritance is a mistake," she said. "Real wealth comes from taking control of your own destiny. I started investing early and made smart choices. Success isn't given to you, you have to earn it." I stared at that quote until the words blurred through my tears. Handouts. Inheritance. She was talking about the money I had given her as if it were charity, as if the $5 million had simply materialized through her own efforts. The complete erasure of my existence from her success story was more painful than her abandonment. Friends and acquaintances began sending me links to these articles, not knowing the real story. "You must be so proud of Emma," they would say. "She's really made something of herself." I would smile and nod, unable to explain that my daughter's success was built on a foundation of lies and ingratitude. The worst part was seeing how the money had changed her. In the photos, she looked different, harder somehow, more polished but less genuine. The warm smile I remembered from her childhood had been replaced by something practiced and artificial. She had become exactly the kind of person she used to criticize, the wealthy elite who looked down on working people like me. If only they knew the truth, I would whisper to myself as I scrolled through her posts. If only they knew that behind every designer dress was a father who had worked double shifts. If only they knew that every luxury vacation was paid for with love that had been trampled underfoot. But the world would never know the truth, because Emma had buried it beneath layers of revisionist history. She had become the star of her own fictional success story, and I had been written out entirely. The turning point came on a rainy Thursday evening in November, almost a year after Emma had vanished from my life. I was cleaning out some old boxes in the bedroom when I found a letter that Sarah had written to me before she died. It was sealed in an envelope marked, "For John, when you need strength." I had forgotten about this letter in the chaos of grief and single parenthood. With trembling hands, I opened the envelope and unfolded Sarah's familiar handwriting. Her words reached across the years like a lifeline. "My dearest John, if you're reading this, it means I'm gone and you're struggling with something that feels impossible to bear. I know you so well, my love. I know your generous heart, your endless capacity for sacrifice, your willingness to give everything for the people you love. These are your greatest strengths, but they can also be your weakness if you're not careful. Never let your kindness be your weakness, John. Never let your love be taken for granted. Teach our daughter to be grateful, but don't sacrifice your own dignity in the process. Love her completely, but don't lose yourself in that love. Remember that respect is earned, not given, and even a parent deserves respect for their sacrifices. If she ever forgets your worth, don't remind her with words. Remind her with actions. Show her what it means to lose the love that built her world. Sometimes the greatest gift you can give someone is the consequence of their choices. You are a good man, John. You are a good father. Don't let anyone, not even our daughter, convince you otherwise. Stand up for yourself when standing is required. Love yourself enough to demand the love you deserve. Yours, Sarah. I read that letter 3 times, tears streaming down my face. Sarah had known. Somehow, she had foreseen this moment, this crisis of faith and dignity. Her words cut through the fog of self-doubt that had consumed me for months. Never let your kindness be your weakness. Those words echoed in my mind as I looked around our bedroom, at the life I had built through honest work and faithful love. I had given Emma everything, but I had forgotten to teach her gratitude. I had shown her love, but I had failed to show her that love deserved respect in return. For the first time in a year, I felt something other than pain. I felt anger, not the bitter, destructive kind, but the clean, righteous anger of a man who had been wronged. I felt the stirring of dignity that had been dormant for too long. The next morning, I drove to Richard Hayes' law office. He looked surprised to see me. I had lost weight, aged years in the months since Emma's betrayal, and I'm sure I looked like a broken man. "John," he said, his voice gentle with concern. "How are you holding up?" I sat across from his desk and met his eyes with a steadiness I hadn't felt in months. "Richard, I need to review the trust documents. All of them. Every clause, every condition, every legal provision." He studied my face carefully. "John, the trust has been fully transferred. Emma has complete control now. I'm not sure what you're hoping to find." "Humor me," I said. "I want to understand exactly what I signed, what I gave away, and what rights I retained, if any." Richard pulled out the thick file containing all the trust documentation. We spent the next 3 hours going through every page, every paragraph, every footnote. Most of it was standard language: the transfer of assets, the designation of beneficiary, the dissolution of my control. But then Richard paused on page 17 of the original trust agreement, a section I had barely paid attention to when we first created the document. His finger traced a paragraph of dense legal text. "John," he said slowly, "do you remember clause 12? I leaned forward. "Refresh my memory." "It's a provision we included at my suggestion, years ago, when we first set up the trust. I call it the Fraud Protection Clause. It allows the original grantor, that's you, to freeze all assets if you can demonstrate that the trust funds are being used in a manner fundamentally contrary to the stated purpose of the trust." My heart began to beat faster. What was the stated purpose? Richard flipped to the first page and read aloud, "The purpose of this trust is to provide financial security and stability for the beneficiary, to honor family bonds, and to ensure that the grantor's legacy of love and sacrifice is preserved and respected." Honor family bonds. Preserve and respect the grantor's legacy of love and sacrifice. Emma had violated every principle upon which the trust was founded. What would I need to prove? I asked. "That's the beauty of this clause," Richard said, his lawyer's mind already working through the possibilities. "The burden of proof is relatively low. Public statements denying the source of the funds, abandonment of family relationships, use of the money in ways that dishonor the grantor's intentions, these could all qualify. I thought about Emma's magazine interviews, her claims of being self-made, her complete erasure of my existence from her success story. I thought about the text message that branded me a pauper. I thought about the year of silence, the absolute abandonment of any family relationship. How long would the freeze last? I asked. Until the issue is resolved to your satisfaction, or until you choose to lift it. The funds remain in trust, but all access is suspended. I sat back in my chair, Sarah's letter echoing in my memory. Sometimes the greatest gift you can give someone is the consequence of their choices. Richard, I said, my voice steady with newfound purpose, I want to execute Clause 12. He looked at me for a long moment, then nodded slowly. John, I have to ask, are you doing this for revenge, or for justice? I considered the question carefully. I'm doing it to reclaim my dignity. I'm doing it to teach my daughter that love and sacrifice deserve respect. I'm doing it because my wife told me never to let my kindness be my weakness. Richard pulled out a fresh legal pad and began writing. Then let's make that call. The morning I decided to execute Clause 12 dawned gray and cold, matching the steel in my heart. I had spent the night reviewing all the evidence, Emma's interviews, her social media posts, the documentation of her complete abandonment of our relationship. Everything I needed to justify the freeze was there in black and white. Richard had prepared all the paperwork overnight. Are you absolutely certain about this, John? He asked one final time as I sat in his office. Once we trigger this clause, there's no going back quietly. Emma will know exactly what happened and why. I thought about Sarah's letter, about the year of silence, about being called a pauper by the daughter I had raised with every ounce of love in my heart. I'm certain, I said. The call was made to First National Trust, the bank that managed Emma's accounts. Richard identified himself as the original grantor's attorney and cited the specific trust agreement number and Clause 12 provisions. I listened as he outlined the grounds for the freeze: abandonment of family relationships, public denial of the trust's origins, use of funds in a manner contrary to the trust's stated purpose. The bank's trust officer, a woman named Patricia Williams, was efficient and professional. Mr. Hayes, we'll need the documentation faxed within the hour for review. If everything is in order, the freeze will be implemented by close of business today. Understood, Richard replied. The paperwork is ready to send now. As Richard fed page after page into the fax machine, I felt a strange calm descending over me. This wasn't revenge, it was reckoning. For 25 years, I had taught Emma that love was unlimited, that forgiveness was automatic, that she could take whatever she wanted from me without consequence. I had failed to teach her that respect is earned and that even unconditional love has boundaries. The bank called back within 2 hours. Mr. Hayes, Patricia Williams said, we've reviewed the documentation. Everything appears to be in order. As of 3 p.m. Pacific Time, all accounts, cards, and assets linked to the trust are frozen pending resolution. I looked at the clock. It was just past 6 p.m. on the East Coast, 3 p.m. in California where Emma was living her luxury life. At that very moment, her world was about to collapse. The freeze was comprehensive and immediate. Every credit card would be declined. Every bank account would be inaccessible. The line of credit she had established against the trust properties would be suspended. The monthly transfers that funded her extravagant lifestyle would cease instantly. I imagined her trying to pay for dinner at one of those expensive restaurants she loved, the embarrassment when her card was declined. I pictured her calling the bank, demanding answers, being told that the accounts had been frozen by order of the original grantor. The confusion, then the dawning realization that her pauper father had found a way to reach across the country and reclaim what was his. Her world was built on my silence, I said to Richard as we finished the paperwork. And I had finally spoken. The rest of that evening passed quietly. I made myself a simple dinner, the first meal I had truly tasted in months, and sat in my kitchen reading Sarah's letter again. For the first time since Emma's betrayal, I felt like myself again. Not the broken, discarded man I had become, but the strong father who had built a fortune through honest work and unconditional love. I didn't have to wait long for a response. My phone rang at 11:47 p.m. Pacific Time, 2:47 a.m. my time. I was awake, had been expecting the call. Emma's number appeared on the screen, the first time she had tried to contact me in over a year. I let it ring 4 times before answering. "Hello, Emma." "Dad." Her voice was different, shaky, desperate, stripped of the confident tone I had heard in her interviews. "Dad, what did you do?" "I executed a clause in the trust agreement that you clearly never bothered to read," I said calmly. "You can't do this. The money is mine. You gave it to me." "I gave it to you under specific conditions," I replied. "Conditions that you violated when you decided to erase me from your life and from your success story." There was silence on the other end, broken only by the sound of her breathing. When she spoke again, her voice was smaller, younger. For a moment, she sounded like the little girl who used to curl up in my lap for bedtime stories. "Dad. I didn't mean it. The things I said, the way I acted, I was angry about the secret, about feeling deceived. But I never stopped loving you. You had a strange way of showing it," I said. A year of silence. Magazine articles calling yourself self-made. Telling the world that you built your fortune from nothing while the man who actually built it was erased from history. "I can fix this," she said, desperation creeping into her voice. "I can set the record straight. I can." "Emma," I interrupted gently, "you're missing the point. This isn't about public relations or damage control. This is about respect. This is about understanding that love and sacrifice deserve acknowledgement, not erasure." The line went quiet again. When she spoke, I could hear tears in her voice. "What do you want from me?" "I want you to remember who you are," I said. "I want you to remember where you came from. I want you to understand that your father isn't a pauper, to be discarded, but the man who built everything you've been enjoying. And then you'll unfreeze the accounts." I paused, choosing my words carefully. "Emma, the money was always yours. But the way you receive it, the respect you show for its source, that matters. Come home. Not for the money, but for the relationship. Show me that Sarah's daughter is still somewhere inside the stranger you've become." The call ended without her agreeing to anything, but I knew she would come. When someone's entire lifestyle depends on money they can no longer access, pride becomes a luxury they can't afford. I had made my move. Now it was time to see if the daughter I had raised was still salvageable, or if she had been completely consumed by the greed that my own generosity had enabled. The beautiful thing about Emma's downfall was its swiftness. 24 hours after the freeze took effect, her carefully constructed world of luxury began to crumble like a house of cards in a hurricane. It started with the small things. Her morning latte at the upscale coffee shop near her penthouse, declined. The valet parking at her expensive gym, declined. Lunch with Marcus at their favorite Michelin-starred restaurant, declined. Each rejection was a small humiliation, a crack in the facade of wealth she had built around herself. By the second day, the problems escalated. The automatic payment for her penthouse apartment was rejected. The lease on her BMW was in default. The exclusive boutique where she had been shopping on credit began calling for payment on her outstanding balance. Her perfectly curated life started falling apart one transaction at a time. I didn't have to imagine these scenes. She called me every few hours, her voice growing more frantic with each conversation. "Dad, You have to fix this, she pleaded during one call. Marcus's family is coming to visit next week. We had dinner reservations at Le Bernardin. We were going to stay at the Four Seasons. How am I supposed to explain this? The same way you explained my absence from your success story, I replied calmly. With creativity. The panic in her voice intensified as the reality set in. This wasn't a temporary glitch or a banking error, this was her father wielding power she didn't know he possessed. The pauper she had dismissed had just demonstrated that he controlled the foundation of her entire lifestyle. Marcus, apparently, was not handling the crisis well. During one particularly heated phone call, I could hear him in the background demanding answers, his privileged voice cracking with indignation. How could you not know about this clause? How could you be so stupid? That word, stupid, came through the phone like a slap. My daughter, who had graduated valedictorian, who had been the pride of my life, was being called stupid by a man who had never worked an honest day in his life. A man who was enjoying luxury built by my calloused hands while insulting the intelligence of my brilliant daughter. Emma, I said when she came back to the phone, tears evident in her voice, is that the kind of man you want to build a life with? Someone who calls you stupid when circumstances beyond your control create problems. He's just stressed, she said, but her voice lacked conviction. I was stressed for 25 years, I replied. I worked 2 jobs, raised a child alone, worried about every dollar. I never once called you names or blamed you for circumstances you couldn't control. The social humiliation was perhaps the hardest part for Emma to bear. Her new friends, attracted by her wealth and generosity, began to distance themselves as word spread about her financial troubles. Invitations dried up. Phone calls went unreturned. The social media posts that had once showcased her luxury lifestyle became an embarrassing reminder of what she had lost. They won't even talk to me, she sobbed during one call. People I thought were my friends are acting like I have some kind of disease. Now you know how it feels to be abandoned, I said quietly. Now you know what it's like when people who claim to love you suddenly disappear from your life. The most devastating blow came when the property management company for her penthouse informed her that she had 30 days to vacate if the rent wasn't paid. 30 days to find somewhere else to live, to downsize from luxury to whatever she could afford with no income and no access to her trust fund. Where am I supposed to go? She asked during what must have been her 10th call that day. Dad, please. I know I hurt you, but this is destroying my life. Your life isn't being destroyed, I corrected her. Your lifestyle is being adjusted. There's a difference. You're discovering what it feels like to live without money you didn't earn, money you took for granted. I can't live like this, she whispered. I lived like this for 25 years while building your future, I replied. The difference is, I did it with purpose, with love, with hope for something better. You're doing it with the consequences of your choices. The final straw came when Marcus left. According to Emma's tearful phone call, he had accepted a position with a firm in New York and would be moving on without her. The engagement was over, dissolved as quickly as her bank accounts. He said he couldn't be with someone who had deceived him about their financial situation, Emma said, her voice broken. He said I had misrepresented myself, that he felt betrayed. The irony was perfect and painful. Marcus was leaving Emma for the same reason Emma had left me, perceived deception about money. The difference was that Emma had actually deceived Marcus about the source of her wealth, while I had only kept my gift secret until the right moment. Now you know how it feels to be left with nothing, I said, echoing my words from our first conversation after the freeze. Now you understand what it means to be discarded by someone you trusted. Her world of luxury had collapsed in less than a week, revealing the hollow foundation beneath all that wealth. Without money, her friends disappeared. Without financial security, her fiancé abandoned her. Without the lifestyle she had built on my sacrifice, she was alone, truly alone, for the first time in her privileged life. Emma came home on a Tuesday morning in March, almost 18 months after she had left with my $5 million and her cruel goodbye note. I heard her car pull into the driveway, not the BMW she had been leasing, but an older Honda Civic that looked remarkably similar to the one I had driven when she was embarrassed by my poverty. I watched from the kitchen window as she sat in the car for several minutes, gathering courage or perhaps wrestling with pride. She looked different, thinner, older somehow, with none of the polished confidence I had seen in her magazine photos. She was wearing jeans and a simple sweater, clothes that belonged to the Emma I remembered rather than the stranger she had become. When she finally rang the doorbell at her own childhood home, I took my time answering. Let her wait, I thought. Let her understand that she was no longer entitled to walk into my life whenever it suited her. I opened the door to find my daughter standing on the porch where I had once pushed her on a swing set, where we had carved jack-o'-lanterns and painted Easter eggs and celebrated countless birthdays. She looked like a lost child, despite being 28 years old. "Hello, Dad," she said quietly. "Emma." I didn't move to let her in immediately. "What brings you back?" Her lower lip trembled slightly. "I think you know. I want to hear you say it." She took a shaky breath. "I need help. I have nowhere else to go." Only then did I step aside and let her enter the house she had once been ashamed of. She looked around the modest living room as if seeing it for the first time, the worn but comfortable furniture, the family photos on the mantel, the simple warmth of a home built with love rather than money. We sat across from each other at the kitchen table where we had shared thousands of meals, where I had helped her with homework, where I had listened to her dreams and fears. Now we sat as strangers, separated by hurt and betrayal. "I'm sorry," she said, and the words came out like a dam bursting. "I'm sorry for everything. For the way I treated you, for the things I said, for taking your money and disappearing. I'm sorry for calling you a pauper. I'm sorry for erasing you from my story. I'm sorry for being so ungrateful and cruel." I listened without responding, letting her words hang in the air between us. "I know I don't deserve forgiveness," she continued, tears starting to flow. "I know I've been horrible to you. But Dad, I'm scared. I have nothing left. Marcus is gone, my friends won't talk to me, I'm about to be evicted from my apartment. I don't know how to live without money. The way I lived for 25 years while saving that money for you," I said quietly. I know that now. I was stupid and selfish and I took everything for granted. I thought the money made me strong, but it just made me weak. I thought I was independent, but I was just dependent on wealth I hadn't earned." She reached across the table as if to take my hand, then stopped herself. "I read the trust documents, finally read them properly. I saw the clause about honoring family bonds and respecting your legacy. I violated everything the trust was supposed to represent." "Yes," I said simply. "You did. Can you ever forgive me?" she asked, her voice breaking completely. I looked at my daughter, really looked at her, for the first time in almost 2 years. Beneath the designer clothes and polished exterior had been a stranger. But sitting here now, broken and humble, I could see glimpses of the little girl who had once been my entire world. "Emma," I said slowly, "forgiveness isn't the issue. The issue is trust. For 25 years, I trusted you with my love, my sacrifice, my hopes for your future. You took that trust and threw it away the moment you got what you wanted." "I know," she whispered. "Money can return," I continued, remembering Sarah's words about consequences. "Trust cannot. If you want a relationship with me, if you want access to the inheritance I built for you, you'll have to earn it back. Not with words, but with actions. Not with apologies, but with respect." She nodded eagerly. Tell me what to do. I'll do anything. First, you'll move back home. Not to the penthouse or some luxury apartment, but here, to your childhood room. You'll live simply, the way I lived while building your future. Okay. Second, you'll get a job. Not an investment position or some high-paying career, but an honest job that pays honest wages. You'll understand what it means to work for money instead of just spending it. Okay. Third, you'll make a public statement setting the record straight about your wealth. The world will know that you weren't self-made, that your success was built on your father's 25 years of sacrifice. Her face flushed with embarrassment, but she nodded. Yes, Dad. And finally, I said, my voice heavy with the weight of all the pain she had caused, you'll prove to me that Sarah's daughter still exists somewhere inside the person you became. You'll show me that the values I tried to teach you, gratitude, humility, respect for family, can be recovered. How long? She asked quietly. As long as it takes, I replied. A year, maybe 2. However long it takes for me to believe that you understand what you threw away and why it matters. Emma was crying openly now, but there was something different about these tears. They weren't tears of self-pity or frustration, but tears of genuine remorse and understanding. I love you, Dad, she said. I never stopped loving you, even when I was being horrible. I just forgot how to show it. I love you too, I said, and meant it completely. But love isn't enough anymore, Emma. Love without respect is just enabling. Love without consequences is just weakness. I won't make that mistake again. She nodded, wiping her eyes. Can I ask you something? What? When you froze the accounts, were you trying to punish me, or were you trying to save me? I considered the question carefully. Both, I said finally. Sometimes punishment and salvation are the same thing. As I sit here now, months after that confrontation in my kitchen, I find myself reflecting on the deeper lessons buried in this painful story. This isn't just about a spoiled daughter or a father's revenge, it's about the fundamental principles that hold families and society together. Wealth can buy comfort, but it cannot buy character. Emma learned this the hard way when her money disappeared and took her friends, her fiancé, and her sense of self along with it. All the luxury in the world couldn't fill the emptiness that comes from having no real relationships, no genuine accomplishments, no authentic identity. I think about the parents I see today, working multiple jobs to give their children advantages they never had. They sacrifice sleep, health, personal dreams, and their own comfort to build better futures for their kids. Some of these children will grow up grateful, understanding that their opportunities came at great cost. Others will grow up entitled, believing they deserve luxury without understanding the price that was paid for it. The difference isn't in how much love the parents give, it's in whether they teach gratitude along with that love. It's whether they demand respect while providing for their children's needs. It's whether they show their kids that actions have consequences, even for people we love unconditionally. I failed Emma in that regard. In my desire to give her everything I never had, I forgot to teach her the value of what she was receiving. I was so focused on providing that I neglected to require appreciation. I loved her so completely that I never demanded she love me back in meaningful ways. Sarah understood this. Her letter reminded me that even the deepest love must have boundaries, that kindness without limits becomes weakness, that sacrifice without acknowledgement becomes enabling. She saw what I was too blind to see, that my unlimited generosity might actually harm the daughter we both adored. If your child forgets your value, let time remind them what love costs. These words have become my guiding principle. Not cruelty, not revenge, but natural consequences. When someone takes your love for granted, sometimes the most loving thing you can do is show them what life looks like without it. I think about all the parents out there who are struggling with ungrateful children, who are questioning whether their sacrifices matter, who are wondering if love alone is enough. Let me tell you what I've learned: love is essential, but respect is equally important. Your children need to understand that your love is a gift, not an obligation, and that gifts come with expectations of gratitude. This doesn't mean being harsh or withholding affection. It means teaching your children that relationships are reciprocal, that family bonds require effort from everyone involved, that the people who love you most deserve your best behavior, not your worst. Emma's downfall wasn't really about money, it was about values. She had been raised to believe that she was entitled to everything I could provide without being required to give anything meaningful in return. She learned to take without giving, to receive without appreciating, to benefit without acknowledging the source of her benefits. The money I froze was just a tool. The real lesson was about respect, gratitude, and the understanding that even unconditional love has conditions. You don't have to hate someone to love them. You don't have to accept abuse to show affection. You don't have to enable bad behavior to prove your devotion. I see parents today making the same mistakes I made, giving everything and asking for nothing, loving completely while accepting disrespect, sacrificing endlessly for children who don't even say thank you. They think they're being good parents, but they're actually raising entitled adults who will struggle to maintain relationships, hold jobs, or contribute meaningfully to society. The greatest gift you can give your children isn't money or comfort or the fulfillment of every wish. The greatest gift is teaching them to be grateful, respectful, contributing members of a family and community. Sometimes that requires saying no. Sometimes it requires consequences. Sometimes it requires standing up for yourself even when it's difficult. Forgiveness doesn't erase betrayal, it transforms it into wisdom. Emma's betrayal taught me things about parenting that I wish I had learned earlier. It showed me the difference between loving someone and enabling them. It demonstrated that respect must be earned and maintained, not simply assumed. Most importantly, it reminded me that I have value as a person, not just as a provider. My worth isn't measured solely by what I can give to others, but by who I am as a human being. Even parents, especially parents who sacrifice everything for their children, deserve to be treated with dignity and gratitude. Emma's journey back to the daughter I raised has been slow, humbling, and genuine. It didn't happen overnight, and there were moments when I wondered if she would stick with it or if she would revert to the entitled woman she had become. But gradually, day by day, I began to see glimpses of the little girl who used to trace my calluses with tiny fingers. She moved back into her childhood room, sleeping in the same twin bed where I used to read her bedtime stories. The first few weeks were clearly difficult for her. She was used to luxury, to space, to having whatever she wanted whenever she wanted it. But she never complained, not once. The job search was perhaps the most humbling part of her rehabilitation. With no real work experience beyond managing investments she hadn't earned, Emma struggled to find employment. Her degree was impressive on paper, but employers could sense something artificial about her resume, something that didn't quite add up. Finally, she found work at a local nonprofit that helped struggling families with financial literacy and budgeting. The irony wasn't lost on either of us. My daughter, who had squandered millions and claimed to be self-made, was now teaching poor families how to manage their limited resources responsibly. The job paid $13 an hour, barely enough to cover basic expenses even while living at home. For someone who had been spending thousands of dollars on single meals, this was a shocking adjustment. But Emma threw herself into the work with a dedication I hadn't seen since her high school years. "Dad," she said one evening after her first month at the nonprofit, "I met a woman today who's working 3 jobs to support her 2 kids. She asked me to help her figure out how to save $50 a month for her daughter's college fund. $50 that she doesn't really have, but she's determined to find it somehow." There were tears in Emma's eyes as she continued. "I used to spend more than that on a single cocktail. This woman is sacrificing more for $50 than I ever did for millions. That was the moment I knew my daughter was beginning to understand. Not just the value of money, but the value of sacrifice. Not just the price of things, but the cost of dreams. Emma began volunteering at the local homeless shelter where I had been donating anonymously for years. She served meals, sorted donations, and listened to stories of people who had lost everything. She learned their names, their histories, their hopes for the future. "There's a man named Robert," she told me one night. "He's 62, lost his job 2 years ago, couldn't find work because of his age. He sleeps in the shelter but spends his days at the library, applying for jobs on the computer. He never complains, never gives up hope. He reminds me of you, Dad." The comparison hit me deeply. Emma was finally seeing what I had always tried to show her, that dignity isn't measured by wealth, that character isn't determined by comfort, that the most valuable people are often those with the least money. 6 months into her new life, Emma made the public statement we had discussed. She contacted the same magazines that had featured her self-made success story and told them the truth. The article that resulted was titled "The Truth About My Fortune, A Daughter's Apology." In it, she explained everything: the trust fund her father had built over 25 years, her ungrateful abandonment of the man who had sacrificed everything for her future, her year of luxury built on lies, and her ultimate downfall when those lies caught up with her. "I was not self-made," she wrote. "I was made by a father's love, built by his sacrifice, funded by his 25 years of putting my future before his comfort. Every luxury I enjoyed was earned by his calloused hands. Every opportunity one had was paid for by his sleepless nights. I am not a success story, I am a cautionary tale about what happens when gratitude is forgotten and family is taken for granted." The response was swift and humbling. Some people praised her honesty and courage in admitting her mistakes. Others criticized her for the initial deception and the pain she had caused. All of it was deserved, and Emma accepted both the praise and the criticism with grace. "I needed the world to know," she told me after the article was published. "Not just for you, but for me. I needed to stop living a lie." The most meaningful moment in Emma's redemption came almost a year after she had returned home. She had been working at the nonprofit, volunteering at the shelter, living simply and humbly. We had been rebuilding our relationship slowly, carefully, like archaeologists reconstructing something precious from broken pieces. That evening, as we sat at the kitchen table after dinner, a simple meal that Emma had cooked herself, she reached across and took my weathered hand in hers. "Dad," she said quietly, "I've been thinking about something. When I was little, I used to trace these calluses and ask you where they came from. You always said they came from hard work, but you never told me what that work was building." I looked down at our joined hands, my scarred and weathered, hers soft but somehow stronger than they had been before. "Those calluses built my future," she continued. "Every rough spot, every scar, every mark on your hands was you building something beautiful for me. And I was too selfish and stupid to see it." She was crying now, but these were different tears than I had seen before. Not tears of self-pity or frustration, but tears of genuine understanding and gratitude. "I know I can never undo the pain I caused you," she said. "I know I can never take back the things I said or the way I abandoned you. But I want you to know that I finally understand what love costs. I finally understand what you gave up for me." I squeezed her hand gently. "Understanding is the first step toward forgiveness, Emma. But forgiveness isn't the end goal, wisdom is. Learning from our mistakes so we don't repeat them." She nodded. "I want to be worthy of the sacrifice you made. I want to be the daughter who deserves the love you gave." "You already are," I said, and meant it completely. "The moment you chose to come home, to face your mistakes, to rebuild your character, that's when you became worthy again. Forgiveness doesn't erase betrayal. It transforms it into wisdom." Emma's betrayal had taught us both valuable lessons about love, respect, and the true cost of wealth. Her redemption wasn't about returning to who she was before, but about becoming someone better than she had ever been. 2 years have passed since Emma returned home, and 18 months since I began gradually restoring her access to the trust fund. The money came back in stages, first covering her basic needs, then allowing her modest comforts, finally returning full control once she had demonstrated that she understood its true value. But Emma didn't immediately return to the luxury lifestyle she had lost. Instead, she used the restored funds to expand her work at the nonprofit, to create programs for financial literacy, to help other families avoid the mistakes she had made. She bought a modest home near mine, not because she couldn't afford better, but because she had learned the difference between enough and excess. The BMW was replaced with a reliable sedan. The designer clothes gave way to practical outfits appropriate for someone who spends their days working with families in crisis. The expensive restaurants were forgotten in favor of home-cooked meals and family dinners. Emma had learned that wealth is a tool, not an identity. Marcus never returned, and Emma never pursued him. "I understand now why he left," she told me. "He was attracted to the lifestyle, not to me. Just like my old friends were attracted to what I could provide, not who I was as a person. When you build relationships on money, they disappear when the money does." She's dating someone new now, a teacher named David who earns a modest salary and drives a 10-year-old Honda. He knows her entire story, including the mistakes she made and the lessons she learned. He loves her not for what she has, but for who she's become through struggle and growth. "David reminds me of you, Dad," Emma said recently. "He works hard, lives simply, and treats people with respect regardless of their bank account. He understands that character matters more than cash." The shelter where we both volunteer has named a new wing after Sarah, the Sarah Mitchell Family Support Center. Emma insisted on this tribute to the mother she barely remembers but whose values finally guide her life. "She would be proud of who you've become," I told Emma at the dedication ceremony. "And proud of the lesson you learned about never letting kindness become weakness. Our relationship isn't what it was before the betrayal, it's better. It's built on mutual respect rather than just parental obligation." Emma appreciates what I've given her because she's learned what life looks like without it. I trust her judgment because she's proven that money hasn't corrupted her character anymore. We have dinner together twice a week, and Emma calls me every Sunday just to talk. Not because she needs something, not because she's required to, but because she wants to maintain the relationship we've rebuilt. She asks about my health, my work, my dreams for the future. She listens when I talk about Sarah, about the early years of raising her alone, about the fears and hopes that shaped my decisions. "I understand now why you kept the money secret," she said during one of these conversations. "You weren't deceiving me, you were protecting the gift. You wanted me to love you for who you were, not what you had. You wanted our relationship to be real." Recently, Emma made an announcement that brought everything full circle. She's pregnant with her first child, and she's asked me to help her set up a trust fund for her daughter. "But Dad," she said with a smile that reminded me of her childhood, "I want you to include the same clause 12 that you used on me. I want my daughter to understand that money comes with responsibilities, that family bonds matter, that respect must be earned and maintained." I looked at my daughter, this woman who had been broken by wealth and rebuilt by humility, and felt a pride deeper than anything money could buy. She had learned the lesson I had failed to teach her as a child, that love without respect is meaningless, that gifts without gratitude are wasted, that family isn't just about blood but about behavior. I didn't ruin her life when I froze those accounts. I simply returned what was mine and, in doing so, gave her something far more valuable than money. I gave her the opportunity to discover her own character, to choose humility over entitlement, to build relationships based on love rather than luxury. The $5 million is still there, still growing, still securing Emma's future and now her daughter's future. But it no longer defines our relationship. It's simply what it was always meant to be, a gift from a father to his child, appreciated and respected for the love and sacrifice it represents. When I look back on this entire experience, I don't see it as a story of betrayal and revenge. I see it as a story of love tested and strengthened, of family bonds broken and rebuilt, of lessons learned through pain and growth. Emma had to lose everything to understand what really mattered. I had to stand up for myself to reclaim my dignity. I didn't ruin her life. I simply returned what was mine. And in doing so, I found peace. If you were in my shoes, would you have made that one call? Would you have had the strength to freeze your child's access to money you had spent 25 years accumulating? Would you have been able to watch your daughter's luxury lifestyle crumble, knowing you had the power to stop her pain with a single phone call? Tell me your thoughts in the comments. Have you ever had to choose between enabling someone you love and demanding the respect you deserve? Have you ever had to let someone face the consequences of their actions, even when it broke your heart to watch? Share your story. Someone out there might need to hear it today. Maybe it's a parent struggling with an ungrateful child. Maybe it's someone who's been taken for granted by family members. Maybe it's a person who's forgotten to appreciate the sacrifices others have made for their benefit. Don't forget to like this video if it moved you, subscribe if you want to hear more stories about family, love, and the complex relationships that shape our lives. Ring the notification bell so you never miss a story that might change how you think about the people you love and the respect you deserve. And remember, love is essential, but respect is equally important. Never let your kindness become your weakness. Never let your generosity enable ingratitude. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do for someone is to show them what life looks like without the gifts they've taken for granted. Thank you for listening to my story. Thank you for understanding that this wasn't about revenge, it was about redemption. For both my daughter and myself. Until next time, remember that the greatest wealth isn't measured in dollars, but in relationships built on mutual respect and genuine appreciation.